Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So today we will discuss text 8 of the Nectar of Instruction. Tananama Rupa Charitadi Sukirtanano Smrityo Kramena Rasana Manasi Niyojya Tishthan Vrajetat Anuragi Jananugami Kalam Naedakhilam Mitya Upadeśāmṛta. The essence of all advice is that one should utilize one's full time, 24 hours a day, in nicely chanting and remembering the Lord's divine name, transcendental form, qualities, and eternal pastimes, thereby gradually engaging one's tongue and mind. In this way, one should reside in Vraj, Golok Vrindavan Dham, and serve Krishna under the guidance of devotees. One should follow in the footsteps of the Lord's beloved devotees who are deeply attached to his devotional service. So, in the previous stages, the devotee had undergone the purification of the heart and developed strong attachment for the process and also relishes the activities. So, the point to note here is that at this stage, so in the previous verse, we saw that by chanting, one can reach to a very advanced stage beyond anartha nivritti to ruchi. Yeah. But the main attraction is to the process of bhakti, not so much to Krishna. Now, it's not that they don't have attraction to Krishna. That's the whole reason why bhakti is being executed. But because of the consciousness, the nature of advancement, the attraction is more so to the process than to the object of the process. Right? The process is done as a matter of duty, and as one's heart is purified, one develops more and more taste in the process. Right? So one may earlier on do deity worship because the spiritual master has asked to do, but then later on they will enjoy the deity worship. Now they may still do the deity worship according to the 64 angas given in Nectar of Devotion, right? So they will still do it according to rules and regulations, but there is attraction to the performance of the rules and regulation. And so the previous verse had gotten the devotee to the stage of ruchi. At this point, ruchi has now further advanced into the stage of ashakti. And ashakti is characterized by spontaneity. It's also known as ragunag sadhana bhakti. So summary of this verse, that this verse talks about devotional service in practice, spontaneous devotional service in practice. Right? So it sounds like a little bit of a contradiction, oxymoron, that you're talking about spontaneity in practice. Like spontaneity in itself means that it happens on its own, and practice means that you premeditate and make it happen. Right? But what we see over here is a very unique mind frame of the devotee that brings both these things together. And as we see more, we will understand what it means when we say that this is spontaneous devotional service in practice. The important thing to notice here is that now the object is Krishna. In all the stages prior to this, the object of attraction was the process of devotional service. The rules and regulations and the execution of those rules was the main attraction for the practicing devotee. But now the person has begun to develop a direct relationship with Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada gives the description of Raghunaga Sadhana Bhakti. This can only be done by those who have completely given up the material conception and have sufficiently purified the subtle body of anarthas by perfecting sadhana bhakti and advancing to the stage of asakti. And so Prabhupada is talking about the prerequisite, the main being anartha nivritti. Right? After anartha nivritti happens nishtha and ruchi, which is firm faith and attraction to the process. Right? Now the person is purified enough to actually rekindle the dormant attraction they have for Krishna. And that's where the Raghunaga Sadhana Bhakti comes. And Rupa Goswami says that the essence of all the advice is to fix one's mind on Krishna without deviation by constantly hearing chanting about him and remembering his pastimes. So in a way, this is the end of the instructions of Rupa Goswami in Upadeśāmṛta. Right? He's saying now, this is it, khatam. This is the essence of all the advice. But he still speaks 3 more verses to give further perfection of this stage. So looking at the text, it says tad anuragi jan anugami, that following in the footsteps of those who have spontaneous love for Krishna. So these are the ragatmika bhaktas that are found in Vrindavan. So here we understand what it means to be to cultivate spontaneous devotional service. So when one is following in the footsteps, then there is cultivation. But what is it that one is trying to cultivate? Spontaneous devotional service. Right? How does that happen? Tisthan Vraje. So these are some of the attendant criterias that help in developing this mood. Tisthan Vraje means that one should live in Vrindavan. Kalam Naya Dakhilam. Constantly utilize one's entire time. Right? This is an important point that we'll see later on, that even though devotion at this stage is mostly by meditation, but it doesn't mean that one sits idle and meditates. Right? There is also a lot of activity that goes on. Then kramena rasana manasi niyojya. Kramena means gradually one engages the tongue and the mind. Sukirtana. Sukirtana is, kirtan is chanting and or sankirtan or having discussions. Anusmritya, right? Meditate on. Here also we see the word anu. Right? So in the verse we see anu coming 3 times. And anu means follow. Right? So anugami, following in the footsteps. Then anuragi. So anuragi is those who follow their heart. So the anuragis are the perfected devotees. So the perfected devotees are following the rag, they are following the heart. And the sadhakas, the ragatmika bhaktis, are following those who are following their heart. And anusmritya means that they meditate, again following the same mood of the perfected devotees. The nama rupa charitadi. Same name, same line that comes in the previous verse on Krishna's name, form, qualities, etc. And then Rupa Goswami says, iti Upadeśāmṛta. This instruction is the essence or the amrit, the saram. Saram means that if you condense everything of Upadeśāmṛta. So Srila Prabhupada in his purport, he focuses on the aspect of controlling the mind, because anusmritya, that this is training to think one's mind in the same way that the ragatmikas are thinking. Right? So he first talks about why to train the mind, how to make the mind your friend, why the mind is your enemy, because it's carrying impressions which can be dangerous, the role of the mind at the time of death, yamyam vapi swaran bhavam, right? How it creates your next body, right? And advice Prabhupada gives is think of Krishna, not of your next life. So why to train, and then Prabhupada talks about how to train. And this is following Rupa Goswami's instruction that reside in Vrindavan under the shelter of advanced devotees and meditate on Krishna's pastimes. Then the process is to remembrance of Krishna and his eternal associates. And then how to serve with feelings under the guidance of a particular associate of Krishna. Because it is under the guidance, it is sadhana, right? So spiritual practice is executed while still in the stage of bondage, and ultimately results in sadhya. So an analogy that can help explain this apparent contradiction, that how can one practice spontaneity, is that if somebody has an attraction to a particular sport, and the person may be practicing the sport for a long time, right? So following whatever the rules and regulations, the person is becoming a better and better sportsman, and then at some stages he becomes a part of a team of really high class sports people who have a lot of natural attraction for the game, right? So when he is practicing with these people, then he also imbibes their mood of natural attraction. So it's not so much taking notes and saying, okay, this particular person laughed when this happened, or this particular person jumped up when this happened, so let me laugh and let me jump up. The more so is imbibing the mood of the person. When the person says, this person gets, and the more advanced sportsman will get up in the morning enthusiastically say, okay, come on, let's go, let's practice, let's go and play the sport, right? And the person also gets inspired, okay, let's go and do it. Or when they see that how those people are enthusiastically finding better ways to do the sport, this person also develops that mood of enthusiasm, right? So we see that both are happening hand in hand, that the person is developing enthusiasm, the person is developing attraction, and the person is also imbibing that mood from the others, right? So one should understand that when practice at this stage is being talked about, it is more so of cultivating that mood. In the earlier stages, practice actually means following the activities. When we do our sadhana Vaidhi bhakti, when we do our deity worship, then we literally follow the activities. The activities have been written down. That take incense, purify it with water, and then offer 4 rounds at the feet, and 2 in the middle, and 3 on the face, and 7 around the body. So we literally are following the activities. But in the later stage, or those devotees, they are now following the mood. So some of the characteristics of Raghunath Bhakti is, as I mentioned, that the focus here changes from the process to the object, from bhakti to Krishna, right? Now, also important to understand that this stage is not cultivated, but it is bestowed, which means that a devotee, even if he is at the stage of ruchi, he cannot say that from tomorrow I am going to be in the stage of Raghunath, Or he starts saying that now that I have been in Ruchi for 5 years, I am going to now advance to Raghunath. So one thing that we notice is that as one advances more and more in bhakti, the component of grace also increases. So in any effort in devotion, there is effort and there is grace. The effort is ascending, the grace is descending. In the earlier stages of bhakti, the main component is effort. So the devotee, because at that time the connection with Krishna is weak, so the access to the grace of Krishna is weak. So the devotee primarily relies on their own effort. So these are devotees at our stage. And we have some idea of the mercy of Krishna coming through Prabhupada and spiritual master. But the main component is our effort. But as the devotees advance more, it's not that their effort slackens. Their effort increases actually, but the grace increases by a much greater amount. So if the effort goes from 10 to 20 and if the grace initially was 5, now the grace is 500. Right? So the grace increases disproportionately higher as one comes more and more in touch with the internal energy of Krishna. So when a devotee is sincerely practicing, then Krishna bestows his mercy on such a devotee and the devotee advances to the stage of sadhana ragunag bhakti. Right? So essentially the advancement is a combination of effort and mercy. That based on the previous sadhana, the devotee has reached the stage of ruchi. And again, they have to understand that it's not exclusively sadhana. Even when the person is at the stage of bhajana kriya, even if the person is at the stage of shraddha, like the component of grace has to be there. The mercy has to be there, right? One cannot become a devotee unless one gets the mercy of another devotee. Right? But advancement is more predicated on the efforts of the devotee. Right? At this stage, that effort has attracted an abundance of mercy of the Lord. Right? And it pulls the devotee to the stage of sadhana ragunag bhakti. Right? So this spontaneity is bestowed by Krishna. Right? This is the process in which the devotee is now coming in contact with the internal energy of Krishna, the spiritual energy of Krishna, and through that spontaneously attraction is appearing. So at this stage, the person is not dependent on the regulative principles of bhakti. So even though this is called Ragunag Sadhana Bhakti, but it is beyond the stage of sadhana Vaidhi Bhakti. Yes, if you look in Nectar devotion, the bhakti is divided at a high level into sadhana and bhava prem bhakti, like two big stages. Sadhana bhakti is by practice, bhava and prem is spontaneous. Sadhana bhakti is divided into two stages, Vaidhi bhakti and Ragunag bhakti. So they are both sadhana, means that they're cultivated. Vaidhi means they're cultivated according to the vidhis, according to the rules and regulations. And Ragunag bhakti is that the cultivation is from the practice, following the practice of other devotees. That is the main meditation at this stage. Not so much meditation on the vidhis, on the rules and regulations. Now, this does not mean that they stop following the rules and regulations. It doesn't mean the person comes at this stage and says, I won't chant anymore because I'm at the stage of Ragunag Bhakti, for obvious reason. The person is so attracted that he finds it difficult to not chant. So they may say that I won't chant 16 rounds because they're already chanting 64 rounds. So their attraction is now transcending the the rules and regulations. The rules and regulations act as a safety net for neophyte devotees. Because the rules and regulations are not there, the neophytes will fall down very quickly. So in some cases, some sampradaya, some gurus, when they initiate the disciple, they will say that try to chant as much as possible. And what happens in those cases is that those disciples end up pretty much not chanting. Okay? Because when it is left to the discretion of the practicing devotee, they will tend to veer towards the lowest common denominator. Whereas when the guru says chant 16 rounds, then regardless of whether the disciples' inclination is not, they will chant 16 rounds. So that's the consciousness of the neophyte. They're dependent on the process and the regulative principles, but not Raghunatha Bhakta. Even though he's a sadhaka, even though he's practicing, but he has already developed ruchi, he has already developed taste. Okay? So it doesn't mean they'll violate the regulative practices, and even if they do violate it, they will be quickly restored. So how is Raghunatha Bhakti actually practiced? Still in the category of sadhana. One must practice this under the guidance of the perfected devotees, the siddhas, right? And not a stage of idle meditation. Right? So there is a lot to be spoken on this, which Srila Prabhupada does not speak because he is speaking to a wide audience. As he mentioned, that the nectar of instruction is meant for general people. Right? So, so the detailed practices of Raghunatha Bhakti is one sits in a quiet place and then one meditates on a certain pastime of Krishna. Right? And then one actually enters that pastime of Krishna under the supervision of an eternal associate of Krishna, right? And then they actually serve Krishna. So we see that happening. Shamananda Pandit, right? That he actually enters into the Leela of Srimati Radharani, and he actually serves while he is still in his material body. So externally, it might look this person is just sitting around doing nothing. Internally, the person is active, and actually, even externally, the person is active. Right. So while they meditate for a while, but they're also very much attached to serving the holy name, serving Vaishnavas, serving the deity. Right. So that's why the verse says "Kalam nayed akhilam," that one is active 24 hours a day. Sometimes they're active in meditation, sometimes they're active in following the regulative principles of bhakti. Right? But internally, the mood is now of meditation. Right? That is one distinguishing aspect that appears at this stage. Right? And because one is still practicing, it is known as Raghunatha Sadhana Bhakti. So the impetus is spontaneous love for Krishna and not a deference to the regulative principles of the process. Right? So as we mentioned in the introduction, focus now changes from the process to the object. Bhakti is the process, Krishna is the object. Right? So now the focus is on Krishna. And again, it does not mean that they start willfully neglecting the regulative process, but they don't derive that much nourishment from it as the Vaidhi Bhaktas derive. Their nourishment is Krishna, their attraction to Krishna. So some of the characteristics of genuine Raghunatha sadhana is that it is practiced spontaneity. As we mentioned, it sounds a little bit like a contradiction. So it is not a stage of imitation, but it is a stage of emulation. And the emulation is more internal than external. So the reason this point is made is because there are certain kind of devotees who under the guise of Raghunatha sadhana bhakti, they imitate the external actions of advanced devotees. They may start dancing with women, pretending to be in a rasa dance. Some of them will may go into apparent samadhi. So they might just fall on the ground and roll in the dust and apparently lose consciousness. So their focus is that they're trying to imitate the actions of the advanced devotees without having developed that consciousness. But genuine Raghunatha bhakti is that they've already been purified to the point where they're receiving the mercy of Krishna. And because of their mercy, they are now qualified to also begin to develop the mood of the perfected devotees. And that is the sadhana, that is practice. So like I mentioned, there are people who misunderstand this. There was a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, and people noticed that strange sounds were coming out from his room, right? So for a while they ignored it, and then one day they were curious. They said, what are the sounds that are coming? And then basically he was making the sounds of peacock, because somewhere in his mind he thought that in the Nitya Leela of Krishna he was a peacock, right? So for a person who's barely able to chant rounds, those kinds of meditations are simply sahajya, right? They're just pretense, right? And the sahajyas do a lot more. So they are the one who actually give Vaishnavism a bad name. Less than 100 years after Mahaprabhu disappeared, then most of Gaudiya Vaishnavas had actually adopted Sahajya, right? So they had adopted Sahajyavad. So they started doing all these kinds of things, like they would have conjugal pastimes with their disciples and women, with multiple women, and some of the men would dress as women and dance around. So much so that by the time that Bhaktivinoda Thakur came, then calling somebody a Vaishnav was actually an insult, because they became so strongly associated with this Sahajyavad. And a lot of credit goes by the writing and the examples of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhakti Saraswati Thakur, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, and then Srila Prabhupada. By reintroducing literatures like Nectar of Instruction, Devotion, that very, very analytically talk about the science of bhakti. And then by practicing it themselves, preaching that practice, inspiring those others to practice, then this whole notion of artificial emotional practice of bhakti, that was disambiguated. Now, Sahajyas are still there. It's not that they're not there. If you go to Vrindavan, you will still find them. You will still find people, especially if you go to Barsana, that part, you'll still see other different times. You'll see men dressed as women. Sometimes you'll see them doing all kind of crazy dances, etc. But at least because of the efforts of Prabhupada and the predecessor Acharya, Vaishnavism has regained the deference and respect that it had in the earlier time. So this process of Raghunatha sadhana, actually it comes from a basis of training the mind, and because a lot of it is meditation. The meditation is a quality of the mind. And so unless one's mind is trained, then meditation is your own mental speculation there, right? So Prabhupada mentioned that the mind may be one's enemy or one's friend, and one has to train the mind to become his friend, right? This is Krishna's famous statement in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, right? Mind can be your enemy and your friend, and then by detachment and by practice, one has to bring the mind under control. Why is the mind an enemy? Because the mind is part of the subtle body, and the subtle body is eternal as far as the material world is concerned. So the moment the soul falls into the material world, it gets a subtle body. And the millions of births that it has changing its gross body, same subtle body. Same mind, same intelligence, same false ego. So all the births that it has gone through, the gross body forgets, but not the subtle body. So they are all situated as subtle impressions, right? And these are the impressions that motivate different desires in the living entity. Right? So in this way, it is dangerous for a condition. So in a past life, a person may be attracted to a certain kind of activities. Maybe they were attracted to meat eating, right? So then those impressions of meat eatings are stored in the subtle body. Even if at this life the person has given up meat eating, but that taste is still there in the subtle body. And if the mind is not controlled, then at some point it will manifest there. Similarly, at the time of death, right, mind plays a very important role. Remember, whatever one thinks at the time of death, that is the state he attains. Person dies thinking of what's going to happen to my wife. Next birth, person becomes a woman. Person dies thinking what's going to happen to my dog. Born as a puppy. So that's the nature of the mind. It is so powerful that it is not only determining this life, also determining your future life. So therefore, Rupa Goswami says the essence of all the instructions is that you have to train your mind in such a way that it is unable to remember anything other than Krishna. And so whether it is at the time of living or death, one thinks of Krishna. But sometimes people, when they say this, Yam Yamapi Sparan Bhavam, says that we'll have a life, whatever we do, at the time of death we'll think of Krishna. It doesn't happen that way, because the memories, the remembrance, the meditation at the time of death is the sum total of how you lived. One devotee was explaining, it's like you have a calculator, and as while you're living, you're putting in numbers, 7 plus 8 plus 5 minus 200 plus 300. You're putting in all these numbers, and at the time of death, you press the equal to sign. Right? So that's what the moment of death is. It is the result of all the thoughts that have happened in your while you were living. It's not that at the time of death you can will. In fact, that's what the yogis try to do. That they try to develop so much control on their mind that they will their mind to think of what their object of meditation. And the process of yoga, very, very long, very, very difficult, chances of failure very, very high. But here Rupa Goswami is advising the devotees to take shelter of the process of bhakti to train the mind. So what does an untrained mind do? It magnifies the problem. M. It imagines pleasures. I. It neglects opportunities, spiritual opportunities. And it denies realities. Right? So each of these things we have a lot of personal experience and also philosophical understanding. Right? So an untrained mind is sankalpa vikalpa. Right? So sankalp is that it is imagining pleasures. If I do this, this thing will happen to me. And vikalpa is that it is trying to reject all the problems. Oh, this will happen, my life will end, this will happen. So that it makes magnifying the problem. In doing so, it is so absorbed in the sankalp vikalp that opportunities to make spiritual advancement is neglected. If somebody comes and says chant, and the person says, when I retire, I'll chant. And when the person retires, the person says, I'm busy with my grandkids. When they're grown up, then I will chant. In this way, opportunities are neglected. And the reality that your next life is being built by every moment that you live your current life, that reality is denied. This is the characteristic of an untrained mind. So how to train the mind, right? Anugami. Follow the footsteps, which means follow the mood of the eternal residents, the Anuragi Jan of Golok Vrindavan, right? Which essentially means that practice devotional service under the guidance of an advanced devotee resident of Vrindavan. Right? Now, at this stage, it's not that they may necessarily have physical association, but at this stage, the mystical aspect is also strong. Right? So one may, by meditating on an advanced devotee, is also able to receive the guidance of that devotee. So Anugami Anuragi Jan means that one should chant and meditate in the mood of service of an eternal associate of Krishna, be it the gopis, gopas, parents, etc. Right? So the process here is that um, one trains the mind to become Anugami Anuragi Jana. Right? So there are three aspects. One is to actually physically reside in Vrindavan. So this answers the questions where to live, and we'll see why this is recommended. Second is the process. What to do when you live in Vrindavan? Remembrance of Krishna and his eternal associates. Right? So Anugami Anuragi Jana. So Anuragi Jana is an eternal associate. So Jan of course means person. Anuragi means Anurag, one who follows the raga, one who is intensely in love with Krishna. They're also known as Ragatmika Bhaktas, right? So they are the perfected devotees, and the Ragunag Bhaktas, they are following the mood of such persons by meditating upon them, right? And then serve under the guidance of an associate of Krishna. So these three things happen, that they live in Vrindavan, they meditate on an perfected eternal associate of Krishna, and through that meditation they serve Krishna under the guidance of that associate. So why is it important to reside in Vrindavan? Right? So this point, Rupa Goswami says that Tisthan Vraje, one should live in Vrindavan or any part of any part of Vrajabhumi. So Vrajabhumi is the 84 kroshas. 84 kroshas, 1 crore is 2 square miles, around that area of Vrindavan. So the 84 kroshas include Vrindavan, Mathura, and the 12 forests. And so that area is special. Right? It's the, and we'll see later on, Rupa Goswami will speak more so about this point. But the recommendation of Rupa Goswami is to live in Vrindavan, the 84 kroshas. Right? Prabhupada would also say that Vrindavan is where Krishna is and where Bhakti is. So that's also one way of understanding. But here the recommendation very strongly, Prabhupada also speaks about in the purport, one should live in Vrajabhumi. Right? So same point Rupa Goswami makes in Bhakti Sastri Sindhu, that a devotee should always reside in the transcendental realm of Vraj and always engage in Krishnam Smaram Janam Chasya Preshtham, the remembrance of Krishna and his beloved associates. By following in the footsteps of his associates and by venturing under the eternal guidance, one can acquire an intense desire to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is a map of the 84 kroshas of Vrajabhumi. So why only Vrindavan? Why not Jagannath Puri? Why not Dwarka? Why not so many other tirthas? So the point that is made by Rupa Goswami and explained by Prabhupada is that there are different moods in which devotees serve Krishna. Right? There is what is known as Aishwarya Bhav. So Aishwarya Bhav is that one is always aware of the divinity of Krishna. So Aishwarya means opulence. So when a person looks at Krishna, one looks as Krishna as the most powerful, as the most majestic personality of Godhead. So when you're dealing with such a powerful personality, then the relationship is very much constrained by that mood So this is what we see in Vaikuntha. In Vaikuntha, the devotees of Lord Vishnu, they're very much aware of his Aishwarya. Right? So you won't see devotees climbing on the back of Lord Vishnu or wrestling with Lord Vishnu. What you will see there is them giving obeisances, fanning Lord Vishnu. Right? The most they will do is shake hands with him. That's about. Right? But that mood of Aishwarya is very, very strong. We see that difference between the mood of Krishna's wives in Dwarka and the gopis in Vrindavan. So they both have the conjugal rasa, right? Madhurya rasa. Wives also have that, and the gopis also have that. The difference is that the wives are always aware that Krishna is their husband. He is their Lord and Master. So they deal with Krishna with a lot of reverence, with a lot of respect. Right? In the 10th canto, we see that once Krishna, he starts joking with Rukmini, saying that he, in a joking mood, he says that he's actually not very qualified to be her husband, so he's advising her to make some other arrangement. But Rukmini is so much in the mood of my husband is always right, and he should always, his words are taken as instructions, that when she hears Krishna speak like that, she actually faints, she loses consciousness. Right? And then Krishna realizes that he made a mistake, right? He apologizes to Rukmini Devi. In Vrindavan, that mood of Aishwarya is missing. Yet if Krishna says something like to the gopis will say the same thing back to Krishna. So there is a lot of laughing and joking. There is a lot of camaraderie. Right? Both the places there is love. Like the wives of Krishna, they have the highest form of love for Krishna, just like the gopis. The only difference is that the love of the wives of Krishna is covered with Aishwarya Bhav. And the gopis, that Aishwarya Bhav has also been surpassed by the strength of the love. Right? So, one might say that the lack of formal etiquette should not result in making the statement the person is more advanced. But that lack of etiquette is a byproduct. It's not that the gopis willfully say that today I will go and insult Krishna. Right? The loving exchanges are manifestation of the extent of love and intimacy that they have developed with one another. It's like a husband and a wife. Right? Initially, especially in arranged marriage, initially when they come together, then there is that sense of formality. And as they spend more time living one another, as the relationship deepens, then that formality gets replaced by humor, by teasing, right? So it's not that the love has declined, it has actually increased. And it has increased to the point that it has eclipsed the need for formality, right? So it's not manifesting just in the actions that the wives of Krishna in Dwarka are fanning Krishna, and the gopis in Vrindavan, they're throwing stones at Krishna. Right? So one may say fanning is better, but they're throwing stones at Krishna is actually in the mood of intense affection for him. Right? So this intense absorption of the Ragatmika Bhakti that completely subsumes any sense of Aishwarya is only found in Vrindavan, nowhere else. Right? So this is the reason that when the Raghunatha Bhaktas are developing that consciousness, it is recommended that they live in Vrindavan because that is where the Ragatmika Bhaktas are there. Right? And now here again we are going a little bit into the mysticism that the Ragatmika Bhaktas are in the spiritual world. Right? So they are actually in Golok Vrindavan. But the understanding is Bhaumya Vrindavan is the same as Golok Vrindavan. Again, this point Rupa Goswami speaks later on in the verses. But what we can understand from here is that because the Ragatmika Bhaktas are only found in Vrindavan, the Raghunath Bhaktas are also recommended to live in Vrindavan. Right? So if you have a teacher and the teacher lives in Chicago, then you go and live in Chicago to learn from that teacher. Right? So that's the recommendation. So therefore the Raghunath Bhakti can also be truly found only in Vrindavan. Okay, so this was the first part, where to live. What to do? What to do is remembrance of Krishna and his eternal associates. Right? So it is said that there are 5 stages of remembrance. The first is Shravan Dasha. So Shravan is hearing. So there is the constant hearing of Nam, Roop, Gun, Leela and Dham. Right? Hearing, chanting the name, hearing about it, hearing about the form of Krishna, his qualities, his pastimes, his holy places. Then Varna Dasha. So Varna Dasha, happens, excuse me 1 minute. So Varna Dasha is to become emotionally invested with the personalities and pastimes. Right? So not only is there hearing, then there is also experiencing the pastimes. So they begin to feel a relationship with Krishna. They begin to focus on these pastimes, understanding that they are also part of that pastime. Right? So they are developing that emotion there, and these are exalted stages. So we can only try and get a glimpse of it in terms of what the acharyas have revealed. Um, um, these are so exalted stages that very few devotees are fortunate to have access to it. So then we have what is known as Smaranavastha. So following Shravan and Varan is also Kirtan, is Smaran. Right? So the Smaran is the main sadhana of Raghunath Bhakti. And that's why Prabhupada talks about focusing on the mind, because Smaran is a quality of mind. Meditation is a quality of mind. Right? And he talks about the 5 stages of increased meditation. Right? There is the Smaranavastha, which is recollection, right? Which is thinking intermittently. Then there is Dharana, which is absorption. There is Dhyan, which is meditation. Right? So it is concentrating on a particular form of the Lord. Then there is Dhruvanusmriti, in which case the meditation becomes constant. Right? And there is Samadhi, in which not only is the meditation constant, but it is complete. Right? And you will also notice that this is follows the stages of advancement of the yogi. Right? So the yogi also goes through the stages when they are from more advanced, the final 4 stages. They also go through to dharana, dhyan, and finally end in samadhi. The difference is that the yogis may be meditating on the impersonal Brahman or the Paramatma. Here the meditation is specifically on a form or pastime of the Lord. Right? So of the 5 stages of remembrance, the first is Shravan, the second is Varan. Right? Shravan is hearing, Varan is speaking, also experiencing. Third is Smaran, which is meditating. The fourth is known as Apar Dasha. So Apar Dasha is revelations. At this point, one is perfectly and clearly able to understand their eternal relationship with Krishna. Right? So at this point, one has reached the stage of Swarup Siddhi. Right? So all the jivas in the perfected stage have a relationship with Krishna. Before they fell to the material world, they were in the spiritual world, and they had a particular relationship to Krishna in which they served Krishna. Right? That is known as your Swarup. That is your intrinsic roop. And at this stage, one is now becoming aware of their Swarup. What was I in the spiritual world? Was I a peacock? Was I a cow? Was I a tree? Was I a piece of sand? Was I a gopa? So whatever the swarup is, that is that is now revealed in upper dasha, and sampati dasha is inheritance. So inheritance is being reinstated in that place. Right? So these 5 stages are not all at uh, at uh, at the stage of Raghunag Sadhana Bhakti, because Apara Dasha and Sampati Dasha are at the later stages of Bhava and Prem. Raghunag Sadhana Bhakti is till the third stage of Smaranavastha. The main focus of Raghunag Sadhana Bhakti is Smaran, is meditation. And when that meditation matures, then from Raghunag Sadhana Bhakti one moves to the stage of Bhava and Prema. Right? So upper dasha is the upper dasha is at the stage of Bhav, and Sampati dasha is at the stage of Prem. When now one is back to Godhead, right? One has gone back. Their spiritual life has succeeded. One is reinstated in their position. So Bhakti Siddhanta, in terms of stages of remembrance, Bhakti Siddhanta says that one who has not yet developed interest in Krishna consciousness should give up all material motives and train his mind by following the progressive regulative principles, namely chanting, remembering Krishna and his name, form, quality, pastimes, and so on. In this way, after developing a taste for such things, one should try to live in Vrindavan and pass his time constantly remembering Krishna's name, fame, pastime, quality under the direction and protection of an expert devotee. This is the sum and substance of all instructions regarding the cultivation of devotional service. Important to remember that devotional service here is for those who have crossed the stage of anartha nivritti, who have crossed the stage of ruchi. So one should not say that this is also for the sadhakas who are in the earlier stages of bhakti. Because Shravan Kirtan is at that stage also. Even though we are neophytes, we are also doing Shravan Kirtan. So one should not take Bhakti Siddhanta's instructions saying that, okay, let me give up everything, go to Vrindavan, find a Babaji over there and start doing stuff under his guidance. Why? Because we haven't crossed the stage of anartha nivritti. We are still full of anarthas. So whatever we do will be anishtha. Right? It will come and go. Right? And this recommendation is for those who have reached the stage, who have crossed anartha nivritti, reached the stage of nishtha, reached the stage of ruchi. Prabhupada talks about after Smaran Dasha or Samadhi is fully developed, the soul comes to understand his original constitutional position. This is Sampati Dasha, right? So this is also Swarup Siddhi, right? And one of the interesting points Prabhupada made is that even when the person reaches Sampati Dasha, even when they have perfected their devotional life, they take one last birth in the material world and they participate in a Bhaumya Leela of Krishna. And there they are further trained by the perfected devotees and then they go back to the spiritual world. Right? So the example that is given is that when Krishna came 5,000 years ago in Vrindavan, and then they were meeting many gopis, but not all the gopis were at the same level. And they were the Nitya Siddha gopis, the eternally perfected gopis who came, and they were also Sadhana Siddha gopis. Right? These were exalted sages, great devotees, who having perfected their life now took one more birth in the material world, and there under the guidance of the Nitya Siddha gopis, they further perfected their devotional practices and then went back to Godhead. A bit of an esoteric detail, but the point that is made is we see in the 10th canto when Krishna blows his flute in the middle of the night, there are some gopis that overcome all obstacles and go to him. Right? These are Nitya Siddhas. They have no material obstacles to their devotional service. There are some gopis that were restrained by their husbands. Right? And they were locked in the room, they could not go. So they joined Krishna in their meditation. or some of them left their body and joined Krishna in their subtle body, right? So these were the ones that had still not fully perfected their back journey back home, and under the guidance of the perfected gopis, they then perfected their spiritual life. Now, activities like Shravan, Kirtan, Smaran, as I mentioned, they're also in the earlier stages of sadhana Vaidhi bhakti, right? So while the activities are there, the difference is the spontaneity and intensity. Right? When we do Shravan, our mind is distracted. We may hear something and it's just hearing. But when an advanced devotee, when they hear, then it's a completely different thing. Right? So like when there are cases when advanced devotees, they would just hear the word Krishna and go into like what is known as internal meditation, right? And just externally they would go into as if they are shocked, right? They would stop moving, but internally, just hearing the word Krishna, or just seeing a cloud in the sky, or seeing a bangle, they get reminded of Srimati Radharani. Very, very advanced stages, right? So it's still Shravan Kirtan, but the intensity is much higher, right? So this is just a chart of what we discussed, that there are 5 different stages of remembrance: Shravan, Varan, Smaran, and Sampati. Hearing, accepting, meditating, and then being in the eternal relationship. And then Smaran is further divided into 5 stages of interrupted, uninterrupted, then uninterrupted and concentrated, and constant meditation, and uninterrupted, unceasing, and anusmriti, right, and constant, right, and finally leading to samadhi. Serve under the guidance of an associate of Krishna. So one should serve the Supreme Lord with a similar feeling to that of his Ragatmika Bhakti, right? So one should place himself under the direct guidance of a particular associate of Krishna and should follow in his footsteps. So like I mentioned, that does not mean the person will actually meet that person, right? But more in a more mystical way. So sometimes they will read about the pastimes of the devotees. Like supposing somebody has developed Gopa Bhav, right? A particular Gopa. Right? Even the Gopas have different moods. A particular Gopa, right? Madhumangal maybe, right? He has a certain mood. So they meditate on the pastimes of Madhumangal, what he says, and because they have reached a very, very advanced level of devotion, they are actually able to connect to that mood there. So this method is applicable both in the stage of sadhana and in the stage of sadhya, right? So it's not that when a Raghunag sadhana bhakta, so let's assume somebody is meditating on the mood of Madhumangal, right? So it's not that when that person becomes perfected, then they say, Madhumangal, I don't really have anything to do with you. I'm my own Madhumangal. It's not that. That mood becomes even more intensified, right? And they actually begin to practice more so in the mood. So the understanding is that when develops that mood, then one's eternal position, one's Siddha Pranali is that they are an associate of Madhumangal, they are serving Madhumangal. So they continue that mood of following in the footsteps. Right? It's the Vaishnava theology that way is very different from the Mayavadi theology. Mayavadi theology is that I serve my Guru until I become as good as the Guru, and then I reject the Guru. Then I serve God as long as I am not as good as God, but as soon as I become God, I reject the God that I serve. Now I am God. So it's this exploitative mentality that characterizes Mayavad. In Vaishnava, the mood of service only deepens. As one goes from neophyte to the stage of perfection, the mood of service becomes stronger and deeper. So a Ragatmika Bhakta, so these are, like I said, the perfected associates of Krishna. So they embody the perfection of spontaneous love that does not have a tinge of Aishwarya. The literal meaning of Ragatmika, Rag means color, and Atma means very essence. So, what is Rag? Rag is mellow. So, mellow is that they have a particular attachment to Krishna, maybe in Sakhya Rup. Madhu Mangal is attached to Krishna in Sakhya Rup, right? That is his Rag, and that is his very essence. Atma is his very essence. So the very essence of the existence of Madhu Mangal is his relationship to Krishna. That is the mood of the Ragatmika Bhakta. And a Raghunatha Bhakta follows in the wake of this Ragatmika Bhakta. Right? So they're endeavoring to to emulate the mood. So Raga is, as we mentioned, attachment, and then Anuga means following or imitating, right? More emulating, and emulating more the mood as opposed to the actions. And that's the mistake the Sahajiyas do. Right? They confuse the Anuga as imitating actions without even having the purificatory mood. So when you put it together, Raghunath Bhakti means devotional service that follows in the wake of the deep spontaneous love, Rag, of the eternal residents of Vrindavan, like the Gopis, Gopas, Nand Baba, Yashoda, etc. While this is still in practice of sadhana, the impetus is spontaneous love and nothing else. Right? Prabhupada makes this very, very clear. There's no desire for fame, there's no desire for personal happiness, there is no desire to experience mysticism, only spontaneous love. So the devotee at the stage of the Raghunath Bhakta is still not liberated. Right? We saw there were two more stages that come after that where liberation happens, but they are able to glimpse liberation. So they are so close to it, they are able to glimpse it. Right? So they have a vision of both their current state, which is not liberated, and the future state, which is perfected. Right? So devotees at this stage can have two forms, the sadhak rupena and the siddha rupena. So the sadhak rupena is the form that they currently have in a state that is still not liberated, and the siddha rupena is the form that they can glimpse there. What is it that I will be in my perfected form? Like Rupa Goswami is given an example. Now Rupa Goswami, the example is given for clarity. Personalities like Rupa Goswami never really fall. Like so, but he did have a sadhak Rupa, which is Rupa Goswami, and in a Siddha Rupa he is Rupa Manjari, right? So he is serving Srimati Radharani. Right? So there is a sadhak Rupena and Siddha Rupena. Now Rupa Goswami accepted a sadhak Rupena to serve Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But when devotees are ascending, then they may have a sadhak Rupena, whatever their form in that life is. Maybe the form is that of a woman who is rendering devotional service. That's the sadhak Rupena. Right? But they're so close to perfection that they can also see the perfected form, their siddha Rupena. So this is a very advanced stage where the devotee is discovering his siddha pranali, right, and the related nitya seva. So in a perfected form, the devotee has a certain service to Krishna. Right? Every jiva has a certain service to Krishna. Right? Krishna re jivere sarup hoy, Krishna re nitya das. Right? That is the eternal duty. That is the eternal engagement of every soul to serve Krishna, which is known as nitya seva, the eternal service. And at this stage, all these revelations are done by the guru, or by the mercy of the perfected souls that one is emulating there. Prabhupada talks briefly about Nitya Seva, right? That what is the eternal service done. And this we did in Nectar Devotion also. It could be in Shantaras. Shantaras is the mood of neutrality, right? So in this one aspires to be like Krishna's cow, Krishna's stick, his flute, the flowers around Krishna's neck, right? So they're serving Krishna in this mood of neutrality, Shanta Bhav. Dasya Bhav is in the mood of servitude. So servants like Chitrak, Patrak, Raktak. So Raktak is like one of the Gopa. Raktak is one of the servants of Krishna. He helps to bathe Krishna. He arranges for the jewelries of Krishna. So different. So there are different personalities. These are all ragatmikas. These are all perfected souls, and at the stage of sadhana ragunag bhakti, one is now advanced enough to meditate on one of these persons. Like somebody may meditate on being a peacock of Krishna if their Siddha Pranali is that, or somebody may meditate on being a servant of Raktak if that is what their eternal service is. Similarly, Sakhyaras is being friendly like Baladev, Sridama and Sudama. Vatsalya is parental like Nand Maharaj and Yashoda. Now, important to understand that all these positions are taken. Right? So when one says that my Siddha Pranali is Vatsalya, does not mean that the person will go and say, Nand Maharaj, from today onwards, I'm Krishna's father, your job is done. Right? So Nand Maharaj is Nand Maharaj. His position is never going to be taken. But when one gets perfected in Vatsalya Ras, they become a follower of Nand Maharaj, serving Krishna in the same mood. Like in Vrindavan, we see there are so many elderly Gopa men who relate to Krishna very much like Nand Maharaj does. They might chastise Krishna, they're very protective towards Krishna, they have a lot of parental affection towards Krishna, right? So that's what it means by Vatsalya Rasa. It's not that one takes the position of Nand Baba, or like it said when Krishna killed Putna, he gave her the position of a mother. It's not that then Krishna said that, okay, Yashoda, now Putna takes your position. No, Putna became one of the associates of Yashoda and started serving Krishna in that mood. Similarly, Madhurya Ras, which is the highest, which is characterized by conjugal love. So one begins to serve Krishna as a servant of Radharani, or more likely a servant of the servant of the servant of Radharani. So what's the conclusion? That once devotional service becomes steady, nishtha, one begins to enjoy ruchi, then one begins a strong emotional connection, asakti, which is what this particular verse is talking about. With the descending mercy of Krishna, the devotee now experiences spontaneous affection for Krishna. Yes, the object is no longer the process, but the object. Right? It is no longer bhakti, but Krishna himself. This is called Raghunatha Bhakti, right? Also Asakti, which is practiced by residing in Brajbhumi, constantly meditating on Krishna under the guidance of an associate of Krishna. This is the essence of the instructions of Rupa Goswami, that one should 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, meditate on Krishna under the guidance of an advanced devotee of Krishna while residing in Brajbhumi. So this brings us to the end of this verse. So pivotal verse in a way, because it comes right after the most powerful verse of Upadeśāmṛta, which talks about Krishna, chanting of Krishna's holy name, right? So this is the falstuti. What does one get by perfecting the chanting? Right? In the last three verses, Rupa Goswami, in 9, 10 and 11, he will speak more about how to reside in Brajbhumi. Okay, so we will end over here. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.